I wrote to the head of the private equity firm and I said, can we have a chat? I said, I'm a very transparent person. I don't like playing games. It's pretty clear that I don't have an employment contract. And in my mind, that means you don't want me. So we can do this one of two ways. We can move forward and have this probably quite unpleasant parting, or we can talk about it now and I can be onboarded with this process and I can help you find a new CEO that you think you're going to need to take the business where you want it to go.
Boy, things are about to get real. Olivia Humphrey has taken her scrappy little film company and her family from her front room in Perth all the way to San Francisco. But now she wants to go home. It's time to sell streaming platform Kanopy. And this part of the journey for so many founders is really tricky. And it's not often discussed because there are legal agreements up the wazoo. But if you haven't already listened to part 1 of my interview with Olivia Humphrey, do download it right now. It's in your Curveball podcast feed. Because Olivia's now going to take you and I inside the belly of the beast when you're hoping for the sort of market valuation that makes the eyes water. I'm Kelly Riordan and this is Curveball. Olivia Humphrey spotted an opportunity early on. Just like Netflix began as a company shipping DVDs to film lovers, Olivia started shipping DVDs to universities. And as on-demand streaming services grew, so too did Kanopy, scaling from Olivia's home in Perth to San Francisco. Olivia, you got to a really interesting point with the company when you decided it was time to consider selling properly. And you start talking to firms and you put together a pitch deck. What was that process like and how different was it from the first time when you were looking at venture capital funding?
It was incredibly exciting and exhilarating, and it couldn't have been more different. The first time was really bumbling around, and the second time couldn't have been more sort of channeled and controlled. We hired investment bankers, they trained us, we had a polished presentation, we rehearsed it ad nauseum, we flew around the country. The investment bankers designed a universe of possible acquirers, which included media companies, it included big library companies, and we'd grown out of the venture capital world by that stage. We were too big, so we're talking more to private equity as well. And as it turned out, the private equity valuations were higher than the industry valuations, which was a little sad for me because part of me wanted to sell to a media company. I always considered Kanopy a film company more than a library company. But as it transpired, things worked out really well in terms of the evolution of where Kanopy ended up. And so we basically sold to the highest bidder, which was a Californian private equity firm.
And when this happens, you usually have to make a decision about how you will stay in the company because the founder usually does have to stay, but your role changes. What was going to happen with your role within Kanopy?
I had a lot of friends who'd been through this fortunate experience in San Francisco, so I was really prepared and all lawyered up for my employment contract, expecting a really long earn-out period, and that just wasn't the case. In fact, I think I signed around 26 different documents, and the document we kept waiting and waiting on was my employment contract. And as we were getting closer and closer to the close date, my lawyer was calling me saying, this is really unusual. We haven't seen your employment contract. So I ended up calling the head of the private equity firm and I said, where is it? What's happening? And they said, oh, yeah, about that. We've decided we're not going to give you an employment contract. We're just going to roll you over on the contract that you're on right now on the same terms, which was quite a lean CEO salary, a very lean CEO package in general, and it was no contract. It was just an at-will letter, which was how most California companies work. Over there you can have just an at-will where companies can hire and fire you with a day's notice, and likewise employees can resign with a day's notice or not even an hour's notice with no reason. It's a very strange employment place over there. So of course, that was a real shock to me. I couldn't believe that I wasn't going to get an employment contract. And at first I felt really sad and really disappointed. I thought, gosh, they clearly don't want to lock me in. They clearly don't value me. But then when I thought about the bigger picture of what I was trying to do, which is over a couple of years eventually go back to Australia, I thought, well, this is going to make it really easy.
But this must have been a big blow for you, for sort of your small ego, because you've built this company. It's on the back of your idea. You've hustled it in Australia with universities. You've gone to America. You've signed up the libraries. You've got investment. You've run this values-based company. It's you, Olivia. You're the one at the helm. So how did it feel to think, oh, they just think I'm sort of expendable here?
I'm often asked what's it like to be a woman in business. And I generally say I truly didn't notice until this moment, where through this acquisition I met probably close to 100 really exciting, intelligent bankers, acquirers, all men. In fact, the whole process, the only woman I met was doing due diligence on our tech platform. One woman. And so I sense there might have been a little bit of inherent bias in this process, being female, being comparatively very young, being Australian. And I felt, even though I thought this is probably going to help me meet my goals more easily, it didn't make me feel good about the team at Kanopy. I knew I was just killing it in terms of revenue. I was meeting every possible revenue target I could meet. I knew I was a good leader, and I didn't quite understand it. I also didn't like this lack of transparency, that we were heading towards close, and here I was. It was almost a surprise a couple of days before to find this out.
And so what did you do?
So I spoke to, in fact, I was in New York at the time, and this is now the day before close.
Oh my God. This is so down to the wire.
I can already feel the adrenaline around my body as I retell this story. And I was in New York and I texted Jam and I said, look, I don't like this. I'm feeling uncomfortable about it. It's not actually the way I wanted this Kanopy story to end. I've got a lot more in me. I've got a lot more to give, and I'm not sure this is going to be right. So I might not move forward. And I remember Jam, there was a lot in it for him. There was a lot of upside for him. He'd had a fairly comparatively low valuation when he'd bought in, and now it was possibly, I can't remember, tenfold.
10x return.
10x return. So saying that, we'd gone into this arrangement over the 3 years with him saying this is for the long term, this is forever. So it was really up to me, and he was very supportive, although it was quite clear that I think he said in his response something along the lines of, this is a very, very good valuation. This is a very good time to sell. So just think very, very clearly and carefully. And from my perspective, I think you should move forward. And so that was very loud and clear from someone I respected immensely and had a great influence on me. And so my next call after that was to my husband, who is probably the most supportive person you could imagine. And he just said, Liv, I know you know what's best. You know what's right for this company. Look what you've built over the past, at that point, 13 years. You do what you think's right, and I'll support you all the way. And hung up. And then I turned my phone off. And I remember all the adrenaline going through my body, and I wrote to the head of the private equity firm and I said, can we have a chat? Stepped out of a meeting and just spoke very, very honestly to him. I said, I'm a very transparent person. I don't like playing games. It's pretty clear that I don't have an employment contract. And in my mind, that means you don't want me. So we can do this one of two ways. We can move forward and have this probably quite unpleasant parting, or we can talk about it now and I can be onboarded with this process and I can help you find a new CEO that you think you're going to need to take the business where you want it to go. And I'm happy and supportive about that. And he responded in a way of shock, horror. He panicked. He said, no, we need you all away. Where do you even get this idea from? We just thought we'd roll you over, but what do you want? So I was all prepared and I said, this is what I want. I want a proper CEO package. I want this salary. I want this stock. I want these terms. And he said, right, we'll give you all of that, but what we won't do is give you an employment contract. We'll just put it in a letter. And so I thought, well, this is probably a good result. I've got what I wanted and I'm not locked in.
Yeah, and you can go home. You've nailed it.
But ultimately it left a really bad taste in my mouth. It really started tapping into something that I hadn't thought about for a very long time, which is something I've always struggled with, which is a lack of sense of self-worth. And I didn't actually realise it at the time. I was feeling all the feelings associated with that. But that was seeded at that particular moment at close. We moved forward, we closed, it was all very exciting. I was up in the sky flying back to San Francisco when the close actually happened, and my brother was texting me with all of the news, and I burst into tears at that height, and one of the air hostesses came and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I've just sold my business." And she went and got a glass of champagne at 10 o'clock in the morning and gave it to me. I'll never forget that. And so it was all very, very exciting, but with this underlying sense of slight disappointment.
How long do you think it took you to wrestle with that disappointment? Because I absolutely understand on surface, anyone else looking at you from the outside would have thought you're an incredible leader who's carried this company so far. You've sold it for an astronomical amount of money and also provided a 10x return for Jarm. So he's happy, and I'm sure you wanted to please him. I can tell how, how much you admire him. But there's just this little something inside that says, this isn't how I wanted to go out. Did you have to wrestle with that for very long?
So unfortunately, too long, and I didn't really understand or process and start treating it until I got back to Australia. And it's a regret. I wish I had understood it more back then. I wish I had more time to perhaps get some help with it, but that wasn't the case. And so this feeling of a lack of self-worth only grew, which started affecting my confidence. It started affecting my leadership skills. It started affecting my mojo. And of course, the environment I was in was such that it was not conducive to helping. And I think I learned a big lesson, which was this was a very, very successful private equity firm. They have an incredible track record with companies they buy and sell, enormously successful. And so on the surface, I should have been very, very happy with this sale. But what I didn't realise was the impact of working on a day-to-day basis with people who don't hold the same values as you, don't work in the same way, don't motivate in the same way, how damaging and undermining that can be. And that's where I wish I had done things slightly differently. Even if we'd been in the same situation, I think I've got now tools and an understanding that I could have coped better. But because I didn't have those at the time, I just started feeling worse and worse about myself. I started feeling I was a fraud. I started feeling, yeah, it's true, they really didn't want me, which was really strange because if you looked at the performance of the company, it was the best performing that we'd ever been. It was the best performing company in the portfolio of the private equity firm. And an example of how hard on myself I was when the head of the firm called me up and said, "Liv, I'm taking all my CEOs down to my huge estate in Cabo, and it's going to be a great weekend of golf and whiskey and cards, and clearly it's not going to be the sort of place you want to come, so you're not invited, but I'm just calling to let you know that it's happening, so just out of courtacy."
I mean, what do you even do with that, right?
And keeping in mind I had this really strangely annoying lack of self-worth. And so for me, I was like, I don't deserve to go on this trip. And I was saying, but I really, I can play golf and I can drink whiskey and I'm really good at cards. And I sensed there was probably more to it. And I also felt it was very clear and it was a very clear, no, you're actually not invited. So in my mind, my reward for doing what I thought was right and throwing everything I had and trying to make them think I was okay, and like this was my reward. And it really sent me into a bit of a spiral, which started affecting pretty much everything.
So at this point, did you decide it was time to step away? I think you were training up the next CEO. You're in an advisor role. Like, how did the next part of your exit transpire?
Well, it was pretty clear that I wasn't going to, I just didn't want to be there, to be honest. And I loved the company. I loved the team. It was a really hard time for me. And I was determined to find someone who did want to be there and who could take it to the next level. So we closed in June, and in December I resigned. And I honestly thought the private equity firm would say, "Oh, thank God, thank God, we can do this in an easy way.
Now we can go to Cabo alone without her. We don't have to uninvite her to whiskey sessions."
Exactly. And I'd got all my mentors around me to help me navigate this conversation, which I thought would be celebrated. And I said, look, I'm going to give you a year's notice. So I'm going to work for another 12 months. And over the course of that 12 months, I'm going to find you a killer CEO. If that CEO doesn't work out, I'll step back into the role until we get this right. I am not leaving until we've got the right person. So it was a resignation, but a year's a pretty big notice period. And the response from the firm couldn't have been worse. It was shock horror. There was words like betrayal. There were all sorts of... And again, I had this really strange moment where I'm like, I actually think this is a genuine response. I think you actually don't want me to go, but all of the external signals are suggesting that you do want me to go. And again, it's just a reminder of working with people you don't quite understand, who don't understand you. It's just not a conducive way to work. And then started probably the worst year of my career, which should have been the best, where I guess I had a more difficult relationship with the private equity firm. But it didn't undermine my resolve to find someone really, really good for the role. But it took a long time. I was left alone to find this CEO. I thought I'd have some help from them. So not only was I running a business and building the executive team and trying to manage this enormous growth we were going through, I also had to manage this and oversee this entire process of hiring a CEO and having people, heads of Amazon flying in and managing this process. So it was really a time where I could feel myself burning out. The hours were longer. I was spending very little time at home. But the good news was I eventually found Kevin, who was from the library industry and is just a phenomenal leader. And that was in November before I left. So it was about a year it took to find someone the private equity firm thought was suitable and that we thought could take the company to the next level. And in December of 2019, mid-December, my family and I flew out of San Francisco back to Australia just before COVID hit.
I mean, what timing. And it's so interesting to think, what would have happened had you still been there and the COVID shutdown. I mean, there's so many things you could say.
It's terrifying to think about, actually. I'm not sure I would have done a great job staying on there.
It's an incredible story, Olivia, and congratulations. Once you were at home and you were able to get back to Perth and reflect and settle your son in school and, settle down, what do you think you carry most from the whole journey? What is it that sort of really sticks in your mind at those moments at night at 11 p.m. when you're reflecting?
I used to feel sad about the last year and wish things were different. For myself, I'm not even sure the team even knows, by the way. So I'm not sure when I talk to them, they don't seem to have any idea of the pain I was going through that last year. But I would have really liked to have left and handed over the reins on a real high. So really focus on making sure you work with people that you really share the values with in an environment that is conducive to your working environment. If there's any sense of your self-esteem or sense of self-worth being eroded, to really look hard and think why and probably get some help or get out of it. But also, one learning that I find seems to resonate when I talk to founders or business, particularly women, is this concept of you can't have it all. And I mean, there are some amazing moments. I had red carpet moments, courtside seats at NBA, just incredible moments that money can't buy, just wonderful experiences. But at the same time, I missed, my son's Halloween parade at school. And in those moments, I really learned you can't have it all. Here I am in LA or New York, living a high life, having experiences that most people would only dream of. I'm sure there were people who heard about these experiences thinking, oh, she's got it all. But I didn't. The thing I actually cared about even more was, my son at home and my family at home. And I missed out on that. But I made sure that I truly enjoyed and was present in these experiences. You can't have it all. And in America, I had too much career and not enough home life. When I first came back to Perth, I had too much home life and not enough career, and just constantly toggling and coming to that realization I can't have it all, but I can try and control the dynamic so I can at least be present and enjoy what I do have.
What will you do now? What are you up to in Perth? I know you're spending some time thinking about next steps for investment. Can you share any of your new projects that you've got on the go?
Sure. I talk about it as a sort of a portfolio style career in 3 buckets, and I call them my 3 sort of passion buckets. And I feel very fortunate to be able to manage my time to work in a really meaningful way in all three areas. One is the startup, so helping mentor founders with connections and training and help and support. Investment in areas that I know about, so media, entertainment, and sort of giving back a little bit in that regard. And I work very closely with Curtin University on their programs of mentorship, which are open to the wider community here, which is very exciting. The second bucket is film. And, we've all grown up in a world of male stories. Hollywood's run by men, the filmmakers are men. You often hear Hollywood actresses complain about their roles being very stereotypical and not having a lot of choice. And so investing in female filmmakers, almost just to balance it out, female filmmakers with female stories, is something that's a great passion. And I'm working very closely with, I would say, a mentor of mine and now perhaps co-investor, business partner in Sydney, Deanne Weir, one of the most amazing women in media I've ever met. And I sometimes pinch myself that we're working so closely together to invest in the next generation of female filmmakers and bring these stories to as many people as possible and try and make it as profitable as possible. The economics of the film industry aren't particularly attractive at the moment. And the third bucket is my philanthropic bucket, and really focusing on something that is really important to me, which is, and a lot of women who have very, very difficult relationships or complex relationships with their body and food. And when I was in my last year of school, my best friend died of anorexia. And I remember just looking at her treatment and support, thinking this has almost made her condition worse, and wanting to help and change. And now I have, age 45, the time and resources to actually have an impact. I'm doing a big project to support the amazing work that's being done here and build on that and look at what's happening internationally and really bring some of these supports and treatments and hopefully prevention to these young, particularly women in Australia, because there's a lot of just stolen childhood, stolen teenage years that women and men go through that I just feel is unnecessary.
Well, I can't wait to see what you do with all of those projects. Look, Kanopy, it's such an incredible story, Olivia, and I think you deserve all the self-worth and self-confidence that is possible, because to take a little idea that you had and some skills in the film industry to create this enormous streaming giant is incredible. Congratulations, and thanks for coming on Curveball.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
What an incredible story. That idea of making sure you're staying true to your values and that you're working with people who have the same values, it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately with my own business, Dead Set Studios. It just really hits home for me. And if Olivia's story struck a chord for you, I'd love to hear why. You can email us at hello@deadsetstudios.com. And if you'd like to hear from me on the regular, you can sign up to the Curveball LinkedIn newsletter. You can find it on my LinkedIn page. Just search for Kelly Riordan. Curveball is a production of Dead Set Studios. We're a global podcast production company. This episode was produced by Grace Pashley and edited by Liam Riordan, with sound design by Krissy Miltiadou.